Fantastic Four First Steps aims to capture the Silver Age feel of its comic book roots. But does it succeed? This is Exasperated Nerd Explains. This movie had a lot to do compared to most MCU movies, as it had to establish this alternate universe, the overall feel, establishing clear differences from our own and the MCU itself, set up the team of characters and how they fit into this so far unseen universe quickly to let the story begin. It almost felt like the second or third entry in a franchise instead of the first outing. It was definitely aiming for that Silver Age vibe like the original comics, from the setting of the 60s-esque timeline to the 60s future aesthetic in the movie, and it did those parts quite well. The look and feel of the world is distinct and different. It felt lived in, and I don't think it's an Easter egg to say that there are a lot of classic FF villains mentioned, such as Mad Thinker and Red Ghost, establishing a history by mentioning all these characters and previous adventures. The movie does a lot of things right and had a good overall storyline, and the hopeful, positive outlook of the world is quite refreshing compared to some recent MCU films, such as Captain America: Brave New World. That being said, you can tell they cut quite a bit out to keep it more focused on the themes of family and sacrifice, even though the runtime was still over 2 hours. One victim of trimming the runtime down and tightening up the narrative was an exclusion of John Malkovich as the villain, the Red Ghost, and his super apes. Though you see snippets of this fight scene in the TV show integrated into the movie to help explain the origins of the characters, I can understand why, as it doesn't really have anything to call back to, it's not relevant to the overall plot, but an opening action scene probably wouldn't have hurt. I think the characters worked well overall, and the team had a nice dynamic on the screen. Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. Never has a mustache been as distracting in a comic book project since Cesar Romero in Batman, or maybe Henry Cavill in Justice League reshoots. I got used to the Pedro Pascal of it all as Reed as the movie went on, and I did like how they portrayed the way his analytical nature can cause problems and friction within the team, but he's also not like completely cut off from his emotions either. They gave Sue Storm a lot of big moments, showed her as more of a spokesperson and public face of the team, except for when Reed Richards said, "Oh yeah, they totally wanted my baby." She is powerful in the comics, and they showed this through her powers and actions on screen. Human Torch was given more to do than in the other Fantastic Four movies, and I thought his little story arc came together pretty well. Silver Surfer being Shala Ball instead of Norrin Rad did make narrative sense given his involvement in that storyline, weaving her side story into his in the movie, setting up the sacrifice at the end. Thing kind of got short shrift, as it felt like his romance subplot was probably drastically reduced. One odd scene was Thing entering the Jewish temple daycare, and then saying he was not seeking spiritual guidance but was wanting to flirt, basically. Which is odd given he is a prominent Jewish character in Marvel Comics, but he's just like, nah, I'm here for the ladies. Also, I think some of their plans that were supposed to sound smart were dumb. Like evacuating everyone to the area directly underneath where they were trying to lure the giant building-sized man is not a good idea. If Subterranea is that vast, the ground could have easily buckled and collapsed, as we saw was a possibility. It was clearly done for the dramatic tension, but it would have been better to evacuate anywhere else since you're already evacuating the whole city anyways. Also, the plan to switch out baby characters with Reed standing by this giant contraption is the most Wile E. Coyote plan I can think of. Galactus is not an animal running on instinct. He's obviously intelligent and think he's just gonna not notice this shenanigans going on in front of him. Another very brief dumb plan was Sue saying they announced a treaty where all signatories were going to dismantle their militaries, and then pans over to an empty Latveria desk. In a world with Latveria, is it really wise for a lot of countries to just disarm their militaries? That seems like inviting doom to take over. I think Galactus was great, perfect actor for it, great look. A few times the scale felt weird, like it was changing depending on what they were showing, but that may be my imagination. The fight scenes, though relatively few, were good. I liked how the Fantastic Four were completely outclassed by Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and were really going on desperation and just trying anything to get by and survive. I thought that worked really well with the tension. Though I do think the clobbering time moment didn't hit right with all the buildup, because that punch basically did nothing, and the whole team was on the ground, kind of defeated afterwards. For a big budget movie, and one that Marvel needed to do well as the springboard into Avengers Doomsday, the effects were bad in some areas. In particular, I'm thinking of the scene with Thing standing on Yancey Street after lifting the car. It did not look right at all. It reminded me of 3D Homer Simpson walking around. Granted, it wasn't that bad, and maybe others didn't notice it at all, but it took me out of the movie right away. There were a couple other scenes where Thing didn't quite work or look right, but that was the most egregious example. I also think the stretching for Reed didn't look very good, though that is admittedly something that just might not translate well into live action. Its usage was very minimal in the movie overall, possibly for that reason. So, quick summation, pretty good. Better than most of the movies in the recent phase. I liked the feel and vibes and overall aesthetic in the movie. I liked the themes that were consistent throughout. The best Fantastic Four yet, but definitely not in the upper echelon of MCU entries. But what did you think of the movie? Did you have any major issues with it? Let me know in the comments below if you've made it to the end of the video. Please consider liking it, sharing it with others, and subscribing to the channel to help it grow. Thanks for watching. Bye.